Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. The end of newspeak is to deprive us of the possibility of argument, not merely to out-argue us, but to deprive us of that possibility. Now, Orwell made one error looking into the future, perhaps. He thought that that act of fatal compression would happen through the elimination of lexical elements, of words. It isn't what we've seen precisely, is it? What we've seen is that you can achieve the same power of thought control, of the compression of language, and with it the elimination of argument through the compression of speech. We live in an age of social media, in Twitter, in which we've seen in the most frightening possible way that the only people who can manipulate those means effectively are those with an autocratic or an authoritarian vision. You may have heard of a leading politician in the country from which I flew last night who uses Twitter exclusively as his means of communication, exactly because in the limited number of characters that are allowed to the speaker of Twitter, our own newspeak, it's impossible to have what's essential to liberal democracy, a developed argument. First this premise, and then this evidence, and then this revision. No, all you can do is make authoritarian assertion. And all you can do in return is make a counter-assertion, and in the act of making that counter-assertion, you yourself subscribe necessarily to the nature of authoritarian discourse. There's no way you can have an extended, reasoned argument on Twitter. You can merely have a shouting match. That's exactly what Orwell understood about the way that the corruption of language leads to the impossibility of real political argument. The second thing that Orwell understood, and that he projects forward to us through past all of the specific details of 1984, the second thing he understood was the power of hatred, and more subtly, even more potently, the way that the power of hatred depends on the manipulation of memory. We always have to have another to hate, whether it's East Asia, Eurasia, Islam, the bad hombres coming across from Mexico. It's essential to the authoritarian imagination that everyone, those proles, those epsilons of whom Will speaks, are focused on the threatening other and not on the powers that be, not on the structure of power. And that's only possible, Orwell understood, if the past itself becomes meaningless. We can only constantly move the object of our rage and our fear effectively if we no longer have a regular and reliable grasp on our own history. At one moment in 1984, you'll recall, Winston is sure that he's seen one potent piece of newspaper that has a photograph of 3 purged inner party members who are now non-persons, now never existed at all. And he's convinced that if he can only share this information, this simple fact that there was a past, things actually happened in one way and not in any way that authority decrees, if he can hold on to that, then he can hold on to his sanity and to his sense of his inner self. But even with his beloved Julia, the woman for whom he has risked everything, he can't convey how essential it is to have a secure grasp of what happened once.
Sometimes he talked to her of the records department and the impudent forgeries that he committed there. Such things did not appear to horrify her. She did not feel the abyss opening beneath her feet at the thought of lies becoming truths. He told her the story of Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, and the momentous slip of paper which he had once held between his fingers. It did not make much impression on her. At first, indeed, she failed to grasp the point of the story.
Were they friends of yours?
She said.
No, I never knew them. They were inner party members. Besides, they were far older men than I was. They belonged to the old days, before the revolution. I barely knew them by sight.
Then what was there to worry about? People are being killed off all the time, aren't they?
He tried to make her understand.
This was an exceptional case. It wasn't just a question of somebody being killed. Do you realize that the past, starting from yesterday, has been actually abolished? If it survives anywhere, it's in a few solid objects with no words attached to them, like that lump of glass there. Already we know almost literally nothing about the revolution and the years before the revolution. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street and building has been renamed, every date has been altered. And that process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. I know, of course, that the past is falsified, but it would never be possible for me to prove it, even when I did the falsification myself. After the thing is done, no evidence ever remains. The only evidence is inside my own mind, and I don't know with any certainty that any other human being shares my memories. Just in that one instance, in my whole life, I did possess actual concrete evidence after the event, years after it.
And what good was that?
It was no good, because I threw it away a few minutes later. But if the same thing happened today, I should keep it.
Well, I wouldn't.
Said Julia.
I'm quite ready to take risks, but only for something worthwhile, not bits of old newspaper. What could you have done with it, even if you had kept it?
Not much, perhaps, but it was evidence. It might have planted a few doubts here and there, supposing that I dared to show it to anybody. I don't imagine that we can alter anything in our own lifetime, but one can imagine little knots of resistance springing up here and there, small groups of people banding themselves together and gradually growing, and even leaving a few records behind so that the next generations can carry on where we leave off.
I'm not interested in the next generation, dear. I'm interested in us.
You're only a rebel from the waist downwards.
Think of how the wave of autocracy, the wave of renewed authoritarianism that's sweeping through the world right now, how it reasons. Think about how fragile our grasp on the past becomes. In France, the country where I lived for many years, the National Front goes about making 1940 hard to recuperate in its reality. In Russia, we've seen how Putinism makes the actuality of the 100 years between the revolution and today always up in the air, again, loses its essential hold on what really happened. In our own country, in the United States of America, things that happened a mere 8 months ago, the number of people who were at Trump's inauguration, the number of votes cast for Hillary Clinton or for Trump are thrown up in the air, and we're told that they're undecidable. We're told that there are two sides to a story in which, in reality, there is only one side, but our ability to grasp and assert that truth is as fragile as Winston's piece of newspaper with the 3 inter-party members on it. Another way in which the totalitarian mind works and is working now is through simple brute power. Will is absolutely right to point to what's happening in the Congo or in Africa or everywhere else, not through Huxley's imagined pursuit of pleasure and elimination of strife and difficulty, all the Shakespearean emotions. No, the world is ruled now, as it was in Orwell's time, by brute power, because brute power alone can make us change our simple grasp of arithmetic.
How can you stop people remembering things?
Cried Winston, momentarily forgetting the dial.
It is involuntary. It is outside oneself. How can you control memory? You've not controlled mine.
O'Brien's manner grew stern again. He laid his hand on the dial.
On the contrary,
He said,
you have not controlled it. That is what has brought you here. You are here because you have failed in humility, in self-discipline. You would not make the act of submission, which is the price of sanity. You preferred to be a lunatic, a minority of one. Only the disciplined mind can see reality, Winston. You believe that reality is something objective, external, existing in its own right. You also believe that the nature of reality is self-evident. When you delude yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everyone else sees the same thing as you. But I tell you, Winston, that everyone else sees the same thing. That reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind, and nowhere else. Not in the individual mind, which can make mistakes, and in any case soon perishes. Only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. Whatever the party holds to be the truth is truth. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. That is the fact you have got to relearn, Winston. It needs an act of self-destruction, an effort of the will. You must humble yourself before you can become sane.
He paused for a few moments, as though to allow what he had been saying to sink in.
You remember,
He went on.
writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4?
Yes.
Said Winston. O'Brien held up his left hand, its back towards Winston, with the thumb hidden and the 4 fingers extended.
How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?
4.
And if the party says that it is not 4 but 5, then how many?
4.
The word ended in a gasp of pain. The needle of the dial had shot up to 55. The sweat had sprung out all over Winston's body. The air tore into his lungs and issued again in deep groans, which even by clenching his teeth he could not stop. O'Brien watched him, the 4 fingers still extended. He drew back the lever. This time the pain was only slightly eased.
How many fingers, Winston?
4.
The needle went up to 60.
How many fingers, Winston?
4. 4. What else can I say? 4.
The needle must have risen again, but he didn't look at it. The heavy, stern face and the 4 fingers filled his vision. The fingers stood up before his eyes like pillars, enormous, blurry, and seemed to vibrate, but unmistakably 4.
How many fingers, Winston?
4. Stop it. Stop it. How can you go on? 4. 4.
How many fingers, Winston?
5.
No, Winston, that is no use. You are lying. You still think there are 4. How many fingers, please?
4. 5. 4. Anything you like, only stop it. Stop the pain.
Abruptly, he was sitting up with O'Brien's arm round his shoulders. He had perhaps lost consciousness for a few seconds. The bonds that held his body down were loosened. He felt very cold. He was shaking uncontrollably. His teeth were chattering. The tears were rolling down his cheeks. For a moment, he clung to O'Brien like a baby, curiously comforted by the heavy arm round his shoulders. He had the feeling that O'Brien was his protector, that the pain was something that came from outside, from some other source, and that it was O'Brien who would save him from it.
You are a slow learner, Winston,
said O'Brien gently.
How can I help it?
He blubbered.
How can I help seeing what is in front of my eyes? 2 and 2 are 4.
Sometimes, Winston. Sometimes they are 5. Sometimes they are 3. Sometimes they are all of them at once. You must try harder. It is not easy to become sane.
All over the world, scenes like the one that we just dramatized from Orwell are taking place. That's how power still asserts itself. Yes, we're lucky here tonight in this London meeting room. We're not likely to be taken to room 101 tonight. But all around the world, far more people are being hauled into the rooms 101 of autocracies and tyrannies of all kind than are being injected with an elating soma that brings them up. And one last thing that Orwell understood presciently, prophetically, even beyond his understanding of the nature of the Stalinist tyranny, he understood that finally power is there for its own sake. And if there is a single chilling truth about the 21st century, is that we've seen in Putinism, in Russia, in Trumpism in America, an ideology of authoritarianism that no longer relies even on the vision, even on the lie of an improved world, that simply asserts itself as brutal domination for domination's sake.
That was stupid, Winston. Stupid.
He said.
You should know better than to say a thing like that.
He pulled the lever back and continued.
Now I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power. Not wealth or luxury, or long life or happiness. Only power. Pure power. What pure power means, you will understand presently. We are different from all the oligarchies of the past, in that we know what we are doing. All the others, even those who resembled ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The German Nazis and the Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. They pretended, perhaps they even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just round the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means. It is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now do you begin to understand me?
O'Brien leaned over him, deliberately bringing the worn face nearer.
Power over matter, external reality, as you would call it, is not important. Already our control over matter is absolute. The real power, the power we have to fight for night and day, is not power over things, but over men.
He paused, and for a moment assumed again his air of a schoolmaster questioning a promising pupil.
How does one man assert his power over another, Winston?
Winston thought.
By making him suffer,
he said.
Exactly. By making him suffer. Obedience is not enough. Unless he is suffering, how can you be sure that he is obeying your will and not his own? Power is in inflicting pain and humiliation. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. You begin to see then what kind of a world we are creating? It is the exact opposite of the stupid hedonistic utopias that the old reformers imagined. A world of fear and treachery is torment. A world of trampling and being trampled upon. A world which will grow not less but more merciless as it refines itself. Progress in our world will be progress towards more pain. The old civilizations claimed that they were founded on love or justice. Ours is founded upon hatred. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. Everything else we shall destroy. Everything.
Thank you.